Orlando, Florida, 2008. 2-year-old Caylee Anthony suddenly vanishes. But the story her mother tells police doesn't make sense. Caylee lived with her young mom, Caylee Anthony, and her grandparents, George and Cindy, in a quiet neighborhood. By all accounts, Caylee was a happy little girl. But behind closed doors, tension was building inside the family home. On June 16th, Caylee left home with Caylee. When her parents asked later where Caylee was, Caylee claimed she was with her nanny, someone she called Zanny, the babysitter. But police would later discover this babysitter never even existed. For the next month, Caylee told friends and family that Caylee was safe. But while she claimed her daughter was with the babysitter, she was out at clubs, staying with her boyfriend, and living a life that didn't look like a worried mother's. 31 days passed before anyone reported Caylee missing. And when her grandmother finally dialed 911, it triggered one of the most shocking investigations America has ever seen. June 16, 2008. Caylee Anthony disappears. Her mother, Caylee, tells everyone she's with a babysitter named Zanny, but over the next 31 days, the truth begins to unravel. While Caylee was supposedly cared for by the mysterious babysitter, Caylee was seen out partying with friends, driving around town, and staying with her boyfriend. She claimed she was working at Universal Studio, but police would later discover she hadn't held that job in years. Lie number 1. The babysitter didn't exist. Lie number 2. Fake Universal job. Caylee's days were spent living a double life, carefree and social, while the city had no idea a little girl was missing. Caylee's grandparents grew increasingly suspicious. They called Caylee repeatedly, demanding to see her daughter. Caylee told different stories. Sometimes Caylee was at the beach, sometimes at the park, or still with Zanny. Her parents were alarmed, but they didn't yet know the extent of her deception. On July 15th, Cindy Anthony called 911. She told dispatchers her granddaughter was missing and that Caylee's car smelled like a dead body. Police arrived quickly, but Caylee had a story ready. The investigation had officially begun, and what police would uncover next would shock the nation. Caylee Anthony was arrested, not for murder yet, but for lying to authorities. The truth about Caylee's fate was still unknown, and America's obsession had only just begun. By mid-July 2008, investigators and the media swarmed Orlando. Everyone was asking, "Where is Caylee Anthony?" Police focused on Caylee's car, a white Pontiac Sunfire. Cadaver dogs alerted to the trunk, and forensic testing revealed traces of chloroform and a smell consistent with human decomposition. But Caylee was still missing, and Caylee kept changing her story. The case exploded into a national obsession. Television crews camped outside the Anthony home, talk shows and newspapers covered every new twist. And while the public searched for answers, Caylee was described as calm, even smiling in jailhouse calls. On December 11, 2008, 6 months after Caylee vanished, a utility worker discovered human remains in a wooded lot. Less than half a mile from the Anthony home, investigators confirmed the heartbreaking truth. It was Caylee. With Caylee's body found, prosecutors built their case. They accused Caylee of murder, but her defense team would soon deliver a shocking alternative explanation, one that divided the world. May 2011, nearly 3 years after Caylee's disappearance, Caylee Anthony's murder trial begins. It's broadcast live. Millions are watching, and America is divided. The prosecution came armed with forensic evidence, chilling 911 calls, and Caylee's web of lies. They called her a cold-blooded killer who wanted freedom from motherhood. Her defense attorney, Baez, told a very different story, one no one expected. Baez shocked the court, claiming Caylee had drowned accidentally in the family pool, and that Caylee's father, George Anthony, helped cover it up. He even accused George of years of abuse, allegations he strongly denied. The cameras didn't just capture the lawyers. They captured Caylee, sometimes crying, sometimes smiling, and sometimes emotionless. The public couldn't look away. Was this the face of grief? or the mask of guilt? Over the next 6 weeks, prosecutors and defense attorneys clashed over forensic evidence, internet searches, and the last moments of Caylee's life. The prosecution opened with a chilling claim: Caylee Anthony murdered her daughter with chloroform and duct tape, then dumped her body in the woods. They pointed to Caylee's car. The trunk smelled of decomposition. Cadaver dogs signaled human remains. Scientists testified they found high levels of chloroform in the carpet, and even a single human hair, showing signs of death. When Caylee's remains were found, investigators discovered duct tape across the skull. Prosecutors argued it was placed over her mouth and nose to suffocate her before her body was left in the woods. Near the Anthony home, on the Anthony family computer, prosecutors revealed disturbing internet searches, terms like chloroform, neck breaking, and even how to make weapons. They argued these weren't coincidences, but a plan. They reminded the jury of Caylee's web of lies. The fake job at Universal, the imaginary babysitter Zanny, and 31 days without reporting her child missing. To the prosecution, the motive was clear. Caylee wanted freedom from motherhood, but the defense wasn't finished. They would tell a completely different story, one that stunned the courtroom and left jurors questioning everything. After weeks of damning evidence from the prosecution, Caylee Anthony's defense attorney, Baez, dropped a shocking claim that flipped the trial on its head. Baez told the jury that Caylee wasn't murdered at all. He claimed she accidentally drowned in the family's backyard pool on June 16th, and that Caylee's father, George Anthony, helped cover it up. The defense argued that the smell in Caylee's car didn't come from a body, but from trash left inside. Baez went further, accusing George of years of sexual abuse, suggesting it explained why Caylee was a compulsive liar. George denied every allegation, and prosecutors called it a desperate attempt to shift blame. The defense poked holes in the forensic case. They argued the computer searches were unreliable, pointing out that other family members had access to the computer. They questioned the science behind the smell of decomposition, saying no technology could prove it belonged to Caylee. Baez told jurors not to judge Caylee by her party and photos, her lies, or her strange behavior. Instead, he argued, she was a young woman, traumatized by abuse, someone who panicked after a tragedy. The courtroom was split. The prosecution said murder. The defense said accident. And now it was up to the jury to decide which story to believe. July 5, 2011. After 6 weeks of testimony and 33 days of trial, the jury reached a verdict. The judge asked the jury, guilty or not guilty of first-degree murder? Their answers stunned the nation. Not guilty of murder, not guilty of manslaughter, not guilty of child abuse. Caylee Anthony was convicted only of lying to police. She walked free as the words "not guilty" echoed through the courtroom. Caylee sobbed and hugged her defense team. Outside, protesters screamed. Across America, people were furious. TV networks called it the trial of the century, but the verdict sparked outrage. Polls showed the majority of Americans believed Caylee was guilty. She was branded America's most hated mom. A movement called Caylee's Law began, pushing to make it illegal for parents to delay reporting a missing child. Caylee Anthony walked out of jail, a free woman, but she could never escape the court of public opinion. The world was left asking, if not Caylee, then who killed Caylee? On July 17, 2011, just 12 days after her acquittal, Caylee Anthony walked out of jail, a free woman. But freedom came with a price. Hated by millions, Caylee went into hiding. She wore disguises, moved between safe houses, and lived in secrecy. Death threats poured in. She couldn't shop, work, or even show her face without cameras chasing her. Caylee tried to rebuild her life. For a while, she stayed with a defense investigator who had helped on her case. She reportedly worked quietly as a legal assistant, filing paperwork for his firm. But no matter where she went, her name and her past always followed. For years, she stayed silent. Then in 2022, more than a decade after the trial, Caylee broke her silence. In a Peacock documentary, for the first time, she told her side of the story, again blaming her father, George Anthony, for Caylee's death and the cover-up. The interviews divided viewers all over again. Some believed her, most did not. Today, Caylee Anthony lives quietly in South Florida. She avoids the spotlight, rarely seen in public, and works behind the scenes. She has no children, and despite her freedom, she will likely forever be remembered as the woman at the center of one of America's most controversial trials. In the end, one truth remains, no matter what you believe about Caylee Anthony never got the chance to grow up, and her story still haunts millions to this day. Thank you for watching.